Hello and welcome to part 2 of this journey through the Wonderboy franchise. In the last episode we had a look at the first game in the line, the aptly titled Wonderboy. The debut entry was a frustratingly tricky and unforgiving run and jump arcade platformer, which saw a plethora of ports, conversions and clones, in which it went by a confusing number of different names: Super Wonderboy, Revenge of Drancon or Adventure Island, depending on what platform you played it on. In this episode, let's venture out into Monsterland to explore the second game of the series and see if things are much simpler this time, or if we find yet more bizarre ports, conversions, clones and regional renamings. Wonderboy Monsterland arrived in the arcades of Japan in 1987, developed by Westone for Sega's System 2 hardware. It picks up several years after the events of Wonderboy, but aside from that and the title, this sequel is a huge departure from the first game. What was once a side-scrolling 2D platformer with one-hit deaths, Mario-like boss fights and skateboards is now an action RPG. Our protagonist isn't even actually called Wonderboy, it turns out. This time he's reintroduced to us as Bokli Temjin, or Book in the Western versions. Although at some point during the development of the previous game's home ports, Wonderboy was renamed Tom Tom in some manuals. There is no damsel in distress to rescue this time, instead it's an entire land. And if we're honest, it's all Wonderboy's fault. See, when he rescued his beloved Tina and defeated the Dark King of Wonderland, not that Wonderland though, in his debut outing, evidently he forgot to appoint a new head of state, so this left an opening for a new big bad, the Mecha Dragon, to waltz in and take power, turning the kingdom into a veritable Monsterland in the process. Nice job breaking it, hero. So now it's up to BLT to venture out into the inhospitable Monsterland and battle his way to the lair of the Mecha Dragon, kick his ass and restore peace to Monsterland. Or would that be Wonderland again?
Everybody got that? Good!
Yes, the premise is pretty simple, and as you can guess, the most confusing aspect of this is yet again the ever-changing names of everyone and everything. Some consistency would be just great. There are 11 rounds to play through, mostly ending with a boss fight for a key to unlock the exit. When you clear a round, your health is restored, and you gain bonus points for any remaining life points. Setting off on your quest, you're equipped with nothing but a diaper and a Gradius. Anyway, as you might expect, your attack and defense are a bit on the low side. Dispatch enemy creatures and search about in the stages to find gold coins, and then spend these coins on armour and magic upgrades. Shields are handy for repelling arrows and such like projectiles, while armour limits the damage that you can take in battle. Buy better boots for improved speed and jump height. Sword upgrades can be won off some minor optional bosses that you can find behind some of the doors. But don't tarry on the way, because that vitality meter that we encountered in the last game is also here. Well, sort of. This hourglass here constantly ticks down, and each time it turns over, you lose 1 heart off of your health. Once a level, there's a time extension that you can grab. Of course, this is nothing but a pressure feature to keep you moving along. It's an arcade game after all, so it's not exactly meant to be deliberately pondered over. There are no extra lives, only a revive potion which restores you to full fettle just once when you're completely sapped of health. It's pretty rare though, so don't expect to rely on it. You're handed it by a helpful ally right at the start, and after that you can only find it in a few shops later on. Speaking of the shops again, in addition to weapons and armour, there is a plethora of magical items to buy, if you have the coin. There are bombs for chucking at tough enemies, a fireball that homes in on foes, a tornado that when unleashed flies back and forth for multiple hits, and the Thunder Flash, which is this game's screen nuke. Enemies randomly drop other items which offer temporary buffs and are also found at some retailers. The helmet doubles your defense for a short spell, while the gauntlet doubles your strength. Wing boots make you lighter, increasing your jump distance, and if you're really lucky, which I wasn't, you might find the mysterious mantle, which grants a very welcome flurry of invincibility. There is only a finite amount of gold that you can squeeze out of enemies and the environment in each round, after which you will find that they will yield items made of gold, worth many points. This might seem trivial, but in fact this is how you increase your heart containers, so the more points, the more total health, the better chance of success. Develop your character and battle your way through oceans, forests and dungeons until you find yourself in a labyrinthine final level where you face off against the dragon. Pay attention to this level, it might come up again in a later video. Being born in the arcades, it goes without saying that Wonderboy in Monster Land is no walk in the park. Right from the off, the odds of survival are stacked against you as you're initially sluggish and vulnerable. Some enemies, such as these Mario baiting toadstools, are easy enough to kill, but other baddies move erratically, some disproportionately quicker than you, and if you're not totally on the ball, you can lose a fair chunk of health to them. Bosses very quickly become unfairly difficult thanks to their unbridled aggression and your frustrating damage recoil, demanding absolute perfect timing and accuracy. A healthy supply of magic weapons is not only recommended here, but utterly essential, as many of these adversaries take an obscene amount of hits to bring down. However, this boss battle with the Sphinx aptly can be avoided altogether if you answer his introductory question correctly, which I didn't. While there's mercifully much less platforming than in the previous entry, it's still highly challenging in places. Put a foot wrong and you might end up having to start a long climb all over again, wasting that precious time, or an untimely slip sees you plummeting into some deadly lava. If you die, you can continue from the start of the round, but without any of the wonderful weapons or armour that you earned before. But the continuous play feature means that as long as you're packing enough change, you can keep playing until you reach the end. Obviously today, thanks to emulation, credits are free and unlimited, but I must admit to using cheats to make my way to the end of this game. That was purely for the sake of the footage, you understand. Once you get used to the tricky mechanics and become familiar with the enemy patterns, you're sure to enjoy this. Yes, this is another one of those get-good games that rewards persistence, patience and precision, but it wouldn't be any other way. I enjoyed this one far more than Wonderboy, even though I had a hard time in the later stages. However, the upgrading system gives you a reasonable amount of choice over how you develop your character, and that does have a significant effect on your progress. Here's a top tip for you though, get a shield as soon as you can. While this is going to appeal to determined and focused players, arcade casuals aren't likely to stick with this past the first few credits, which is probably why it never enjoyed an arcade release outside of Japan, because, let's be honest, Western players were always a little less patient. A lengthy RPG action hybrid isn't exactly a natural fit for the arcades anyway, particularly not in the West, where platformers, shmups and brawlers were more popular arcade fare. Wonderboy in Monster Land is more of a genre that better suits being played in the home environment. Which is just as well, because in 1988 Wonderboy in Monster Land was ported to almost every home console and computer at the time. The Sega Master System received a port, of course, it would be rude not to, retaining the arcade title in the West, but renamed as Super Wonderboy in Monster World in Japan. This began the Monster World naming convention, which would persist in that region. Graphically, it was as faithful as it could be, with some minor changes to the layout, but the addition of FM sound support makes it a very nice conversion, and they even added in an extra level. As with the first entry, Activision took care of the home computer ports, churning out conversions for the Speccy, Amstrad, Commodore 64, Amiga and Atari ST. These were all released under the name of Super Wonderboy in Monster Land, consistent with the naming convention from the first game. The arcade version of Wonderboy in Monster Land was well received, peaking at number 7 in Game Machine magazine's 1987 chart. The Sega Master System port was similarly applauded, with CVG magazine awarding it a 9 out of 10 score in their June 88 issue, praising the mix of RPG and action and the quality of the graphics. The C64 port was savaged by Zap64, who criticised it for its multi-loading issues and repetitive gameplay, awarding it 68% for their troubles. The Spectrum version is surprisingly competent, save for some squiffy jumping physics, but it was enjoyed enough for its graphics and gameplay that Sinclair user gave it an impressive 90%. Faring less well, however, was the Amiga port. Amiga format didn't appreciate the abysmal sound, choppy scrolling, or the lack of infinite continues, and awarded it a mere 51%. This time around, there were numerous clones of Monster Land on other consoles. As with before, Hudson Soft attained the rights to make their own conversion without the Wonderboy branding, but this time, instead of placing it under the Adventure Island umbrella, attached the branding of a popular Japanese chocolate brand and called it Bikuriman World. And instead of the NES as with before, this time they released it on the PC Engine, a console which was enjoying a great deal of popularity in its native market of Japan. Despite the rebranding, it is mostly graphically similar to the arcade original, changing only the story and character names to suit. For the Nintendo Famicom, Monsterland was completely Doki Doki panicked by NMK and Jaleco, and it became Sayuki World, which means Journey to the West World, borrowing themes and characters from Chinese literature. The sequel, Sayuki World 2 Celestial World of Meijin, ironically did journey to the West World, although under the less elegant moniker of Wampum, for a stateside exclusive release on the NES. In yet another case of an existing property being grafted onto the game, Brazilian developers Tectoy retooled Monsterland around their extremely popular kids cartoon Monica's Gang and released it as Monica in the Dragon's Castle. In this revision, Wonderboy's character sprite was replaced by one of the cartoon's protagonists, who instead of using a sword, cheerfully twats enemies with a blue stuffed rabbit. Other than that, very little else has changed. Predictably, the game did very well in Brazil and spawned a number of sequels, which I am sure we will encounter later on in this series. And so that was Wonderboy in Monsterland, perhaps one of the most ported and renamed games of the entire Wonderboy franchise. In the next instalment, we'll be infiltrating the monster lair for the third entry in the series. If you have enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe for more. Click the bell icon to be notified of new uploads. If you want to help support the channel, why not join the action over on Patreon? Membership is only $1 and you will receive an on-screen credit as thanks, as well as early access to new videos 24 hours in advance. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you the next time on Retro Respawn.